Well, good evening, and welcome to Celebration Church's Wednesday night service. Of course, we're in the middle of the COVID pandemic still, so tonight's service is actually going to be videotaped and put online. But before too long, we'll be back together live and in person, and we're looking forward to that day when we can see you face to face. Tonight, we've got a special message, and the first thing you're probably wondering is, what's the deal with the get-up? Well, this is called academic regalia. And this is the costume that's worn at universities when there's an important occasion or event like a graduation, for instance. And all the different parts of the costume have meaning. For instance, this hat, it's called a tam. You've probably seen the four-sided one that's used in high school and college graduations. Well, those four sides represent the 4 years that it took them to get that degree. And as you move up into higher degrees, you get more sides to your cap. You get a 6. And then finally, when you get your doctoral degree, you get an 8-year or an 8-sided cap. You also have these funky little stripes on your costume. They all mean something important. For instance, green means that I studied healthcare. And then finally, you've got this thing right here. This is called a hood. Matter of fact, when you graduate, they put the hood on you. And the colors of the hood represent the school that you got your degree from. So mine are red and black, and that's because I went to University of South Carolina. I know what you're thinking. He's a Gamecock. Everybody, what can I say? Everybody's got a past, okay? I mean, eventually our skeletons are going to come out of the closet. So there we go. And so now the reason that I'm in this particular costume today is I was thinking about all the students out there who are not going to get a graduation ceremony this year. And I thought it would be sort of neat if we took tonight's service and we dedicated it to all the students who are graduating. Now, wait. Before you push pause on your remote control, thinking to yourself, well, I'm not graduating from school. This message has nothing in it for me. I want you to hang with me, okay? Because tonight's message is actually going to be entitled 5 Things You Don't Know About Yourself. And we're going to talk about becoming an adult and going out into the world on your own, and 5 things that you need to learn about this world. So it's a great message. It's applicable to everybody. It's short. It's only a couple minutes long, and so you get credit for going to church and not having spent a bunch of time. And hey, if you know somebody who's graduating from high school or college, send them the link to this video, because I think it'd be a great opportunity for you to get them to see a little bit of what graduation and moving into the adult world is all about, particularly from a Christian worldview. So I hope you enjoyed the message. Tonight it's entitled 5 Things You Probably Don't Know About Yourself. Well, welcome. Welcome, parents, family, friends, teachers, administrators, and most importantly, welcome graduates to the 2020 graduation ceremony. My name is Dr. Grat Correl. I am your guest speaker for today, which means, students, the only thing that is now standing between you and a diploma is me and my graduation speech. Now look, I've done a lot of these things before, okay? I know what they're like. They're long and they're boring. So I'm going to make you a deal. If you actually pay attention to what I'm going to tell you here in the next little bit, I'm going to keep it short and sweet. 5 points, 12 minutes, 37 seconds on the speech. However, if you fade out on me, I'm going to stretch this thing out to 45 minutes long, okay? And so, Lisa, that means I need you to get a fork. And if Braden starts falling asleep, just sort of poke him in the side. And see, the reason, Braden, that I want you to pay attention to this message is because what I'm about to tell you is really, really important. You're leaving mom and dad's home, you're about to go in the world all by yourself, and you need to understand the world that you're about to go into. There are 5 things about this world that you need to understand. 5 things that hallmark your generation. 5 things that you may not even know about yourself. So hang with me, because I think it's going to be a good talk. So today, Katie, today is your commencement ceremony. And I don't know if you've ever thought about that word before or not, but it's sort of a strange word, isn't it? If you look it up in Webster's dictionary, it has 2 definitions. The first one is a ceremony, like we're having today, in which students get their degrees because they're finishing up, they're ending their education. But the other definition is one where you begin something, you are commencing or you're starting something. And when you look at that, you almost think that that term is oxymoronical. On one hand, it means one thing. On the other hand, it means something exactly the opposite. So why would we use that for graduation? Well, it's true. You are finishing your studies, but you're also at the same time starting a new phase of your life. You're starting that time in life when you're going to go out and be adults on your own. And I want you to understand 5 things as you start your life as adults. 5 things about this world that you're about to go into. So number 1, you're about to enter into an age of opportunity. An age of opportunity. Now, Ben, you probably don't understand how incredible this world that you live in really is because you've never known anything else. But the generation that you're a part of is one like world history has never seen before. And to help you understand that a little bit, Ben, I want to go back in world history and I want to look at a couple of times and eras. So, Matt, let me ask you a question. Now, Matt, what happened between 2000 BC and 500 BC? And you're thinking to yourself, well, I don't know. I slept through Miss Widener's history class most of the time. Matt, it's okay. That was a rhetorical question, okay? It's one of those things that speakers use to add dramatic emphasis to their talk, all right? Nobody actually expects you to answer that, okay? 2000 to 500 BC, that was the Bronze Age, Matt, Bronze Age. It took us 1,500 years as a species to learn how to forge metal. And you're thinking to yourself, well, why so long? 1,500 years. And the answer is, it was that one guy, Matt, the one guy who was there going, oh, I don't want to make the transition to metal tools. I like my flint and obsidian. You know, it's so easy. You just go, you knock a little piece of the rock off. You got an arrowhead. All this metal tools. I mean, you got to find the right rock, and then you got to build the fire. Ooh, it's so hot. And then there's just the smashing. What's up with all the smashing? My elbow and my shoulder, it hurts. And that's the reason it took us 1,500 years to learn how to work metal tools. So, Ivy, let me ask you a question. Ivy, what happened between 500 AD and 1500 AD. Again, it's a rhetorical question. You don't actually have to answer that, okay? But that's the Dark Ages, Ivy. That was the time roughly from the fall of the Roman Empire to the beginning of the Renaissance. It was the time when we had lost Western civilization and culture, and it took us an entire millennia to find it again. 1,000 years to find something we had lost. That's longer than it takes my son to find something when it's lost in his room. 1,000 years. Now, Pritchard, let me ask you a question. What happened between 1908 and 1969? Well, 1908 was when Ford came out with a Model T. That was the first time that the average person could actually afford a car. See, prior to that, people, well, they walked everywhere. They took the train, horse, whatever, and then the Model T came out, and now everybody could drive everywhere. 1969, 61 years later, we ended up traveling to the moon. 61 years in human history, we went from horse and buggy to space travel. 61 years. And look at what's happened in the 50 years since then. I mean, the growth in computer technology and in technology communications, it's phenomenal. It's phenomenal what's happened. And there's no other generation that has seen this amount of change and progress and growth in such a rapid period of time as yours. You guys just don't know how good you've got it. Josh, did you know, Josh, that when we were kids, when your parents were your age, our parents, your grandparents, used to fuss at us about playing video games. They used to say things like, don't play the video games. Go outside, spend some time, get some fresh air. Why don't you do something where you can, get a job and a career? You're wasting your brain on the video games. And now, your generation, you can actually get a job playing video games. There's actually money for going out and playing video games now. So your parents, what are we saying to you? Get out from outdoors, get out of the sunshine, you're going to get skin cancer, go inside, play video games, train for the future, get yourself a job. It's an amazing, amazing time to be alive. But the problem is, the age of opportunity was only possible because, number two, it's also an age of exponentiality. an age of exponentiality. Now, Pigeon, let's just shoot straight here for a second. It's been, I don't know, 30 years since your parents have been in math class, so I'm going to make this really simple for them, okay? So Tara, Dan, and all the other parents that are out there, here you go. 1 plus 1, that equals 2, that's additive growth, okay? 2 times 2 is 4, that's multiplicative growth. But exponential growth, it's a doubling effect. So it's 2, and then 4, and then 8, and then 16. And the tricky thing about exponential growth is this: it's non-intuitive. It just doesn't make sense to our brains. So for instance, let me give you an example. I got this piece of paper here, right? Oh, it's about 1 millimeter thick. And I fold it one time, and now this piece of paper is 2 millimeters thick. And then I fold it a second time. Now that paper is 4 millimeters thick. I fold it a third time. It's now 8 millimeters thick. How thick do you think it is when I fold it 40 times? 40 times. 5 feet tall? Or maybe to the roof of this building? Actually, you fold it 40 times, and it would reach from here to the moon. To the moon! That's 250,000 miles away. 250,000 miles away. It makes no sense intuitively, but I'm telling you, do the math. It makes sense. I know Mr. Howard. He's probably already out there doing the math, okay? Fold it 40 times. Goes from here to the moon. 100 times. It goes from here to the far edge of the universe. It goes to the farthest known object that we were able to capture with the Hubble Space Telescope. And the problem with this world of opportunity is that it came at a time when we had exponential growth. And exponential growth, of course, is only possible for a short period of time. At some point, it is no longer sustainable. And what happens is, it all starts falling apart. Matter of fact, Gavin, you know about this, even though you may not understand the term or know the term, but sociologists call this the tipping point, okay? And you remember, Gavin, when you were a kid, you'd be playing with blocks and you'd stack them up and you'd have 7 blocks and the tower was perfectly stable. And then Gavin, you put the 8th block on there and it wobbled just a little bit. And then what happened, Gavin, when you put the 9th block on there? The whole thing fell apart, right? That's called the tipping point. Our society is at the 8th point, and you see it. The fabric of our society is fraying, and you see the elements of our humanity falling apart, and yet we're trying to put the 9th block on there, growing faster and faster. And that has led to a lot of angst and a lot of worry and a lot of concern in our society, and that's why, Ashley, we call this also the age of anxiety. So Ashley, you know that historians have different names for different epochs, right? You've got the Bronze Age we talked about, you've got the Stone Age, and those are called that because they are based on what historically typifies that era. Well, your era is one of the age of anxiety. Do you know, Ashley, that 4 of the top 10 selling drugs of all times are mood stabilizers? It's true. And did you know that the average child today, and this information, by the way, comes from the National Institutes of Mental Health, and this was done pre-pandemic, so I can imagine that the numbers are only worse now, but did you know that the average child today suffers the same amount of psychological stress as the average patient in the psychiatric hospital in the 1950s? I mean, it's phenomenal. It's amazing what you guys have to go through. It's just, I mean, I think about back in my day, if someone didn't like you, they wrote something nasty about you on the bathroom wall, janitor cleaned it off later on, no big deal. But your era, I mean, it's phenomenal. People put all kinds of nasty things on you and social media. It's just, I mean, the pressures that you guys are suffering from, it's amazing. It's almost as if the good life can only be handled with a large dose of Valium. It's the age of anxiety. And the problem, Gabe, is that also it's number 4. It's an age of generational disconnect. The age of generational disconnect. Now, I know, Gabe, that you've probably said something to your parents like, well, you guys just don't understand. And you know what? Every teenager, every young adult has said that to their parents. But your generation probably actually has a validity in making that statement. And the reason is things have changed so rapidly that there's nobody else who understands this kind of change and growth within a society as your generation does. I mean, you guys are digital natives. Even your older siblings started off with paper books and then eventually made the transition. But you guys, it's almost like your cell phones are a vital organ. It's as important as your heart or your lung. You can't live without it. You're so interconnected, and we've never had a generation like that. And so as you're going through all this angst and strife, you reach out to your parents. And of course, we love you and we care about you. But to be honest with you, you're really on your own for most of this experience because we just don't have the resources and tools. We just come from a different world. See, back when your parents were your age, matter of fact, and I know this is true of your grandparents, we used to have things like full-service gas stations, okay? You'd pull into the gas station, and a guy would come out, and he would pump the gas for you. You never even got out of the car. He'd check the tire pressure and the oil. And he would clean off the windshield. I mean, it's all part of it, okay? And if you were driving around back in the day, you always had a quarter in your pocket. Ask your parents why. They'll tell you why. And ask your parents why. It used to be a dime. It was a dime before it was a quarter. And then if you had to go to the restroom, well, you went into the restroom and there was this big metal box and there was this paper towel thing that it was almost like a long sheet, and you wiped your hands on it, and then it went back up into the machine and it just kept going around and around. This was back in the days before paper towels, before paper hand towels, okay? You've never lived in a world where there was the Soviet Union. The Berlin Wall fell a good decade before you guys were ever born. You've never lived under that threat of a potential nuclear war between us and the Soviet Union. It's always been Russia during your lifetime. You've never known a world without terrorism, where there wasn't a threat of a bomb going off or people shooting into school. I mean, the world that you guys grew up in is so totally different. You've never gone to the TV and actually had to change the knob. You have no idea what the difference between a UHF and a VHF is. And for crying out loud, your generation doesn't even know that Alice Cooper is a man and not a woman. See, that's the problem with your generation, is it's one that's disconnected from those before you. And unfortunately, you're really on your own to figure a lot of this out. And this has led to point number 5, which is you also live in an age of moral upheaval. In an age of moral upheaval. Now, I've traveled all over this world. I have been from one corner of the globe to the other. And I found that in the different cultures and societies, there certainly are a lot of differences. We dress differently, we eat different foods, but there's probably a whole lot more similarities than there are differences. For instance, all cultures and societies have a common ethic, a common moral code that they adhere to. We know that our children are precious and valuable. We know that it's immoral and wrong to take advantage of the elderly and the vulnerable in our culture. And this is something that has guided mankind from the beginning of time until now, and yet your generation is the first generation to question all of those things. So let me ask you a question. Let me ask you a question, Drew. Why did we become the dominant species on this planet? Why did humans rise above all other planets on the species, or all the other animals on this planet? Was it because we were the largest animal? No. I mean, you think about whales, they're a whole lot bigger. Dinosaurs were certainly a lot bigger than we were. Was it the fact that we were the strongest animal on the planet? No. I mean, if you think about it, most primates actually have more muscle mass and density inch per square inch than humans do. I mean, think of gorillas and chimpanzees. They're a whole lot stronger than we are. Is it the fact that we're the best adapted, that we're the best physically adapted to different climates? And the answer is really no. I mean, if you think about it, we can only survive in a very small temperature range without having some kind of garments or adaptation to the temperature of our environment, whereas dogs, they can live from pole to pole in our country or in our world. What about our ability to conserve energy, to consume calories and to conserve it? No, I mean, you really have to eat 3 times a day, and you got the Gila monster, and he only eats twice a year. He's much better at conserving energy. What about the size of our brains and our superior intellect? Maybe that's what made us the dominant species. No, I mean, have you met the general public? Have you met the general public? I mean, obviously it's not it. Opposable thumbs. What about the fact that we can grasp things? Well, that are animals on the planet that can do that. Pandas, koalas, honey badgers. What about our ability to organize into complex social structures in large societies to get things done? Well, no. I mean, you think about bees or even ants. I mean, they have an incredible complex social structure and they have no vocabulary or words to even be able to communicate with. No, the one thing that allowed us to become the dominant species on the planet is our moral code. Do you know we're the only species on the planet that knows how to blush? Now, there are other animals that can change their skin tone, but they use that as camouflage, for instance. We are the only species that actually can demonstrate physically shame through our skin tone. And yet we're losing that common moral code. Your generation is different than all others. It's asking questions that no other generation dared to ask because they knew that there was a common morality that was essential to us as humans surviving on this planet. Matter of fact, Jeremiah talks about a generation of people that were so immoral in the way they lived their lives that they had forgotten how to blush, even though their behavior was shameful. And your generation is the first one to have this type of moral upheaval. So that's it. That's what you guys get, okay? This is a world that you're going into as adults. Is incredible age of opportunity, just phenomenal. But unfortunately, that's only happened as a result of this also being an age of exponential growth and change. And this has caused all kinds of anxiety and worry and angst. And you guys are really on your own. I mean, it's you just, previous generations just don't understand what you're going through. And your whole generation has questioned everything that has been unquestionable in human history up until this time. And that's it. That's the world you're going into. That's the world that we're sending you out into. And, I wish it was better. I mean, I really wish it was. But what can I say? I mean, our time as parents, we're done. Wish we had done a better job. You get what you get. Too bad. But as you go out into this world, I want to leave you with one final challenge. One thing to think about. As you cross this threshold from being under our household to being out there in your own, despite the fact that the world's crazy and chaotic, and I want to challenge you in this one thing. I challenge you. No, that's not really the right word. It's not strong enough. I know. I dare you. I dare you to do better than the generations that came before you, who did so much more, having so much less. I dare you, Drew, to do better than your grandmother, who went from farmhouse to White House. A girl who grew up on a farm in rural Wisconsin, no electricity when she was a child, came from a town where nobody went to college. She ended up getting a scholarship at one of the most prestigious colleges in our country, went on to get her graduate degrees, ended up becoming a college professor herself, and for the last 15 years has been working with one of the former first ladies on a humanitarian project that continues to this day. I dare you to do better than your great-grandfather, who, when he was younger than you, went off to fight in World War I, left everything behind for another part of the world that he knew nothing about, and risked his life so that his children and grandchildren could be free. I dare you, Drew, to be better than his mother, whose husband died at a very young age and left her with a household full of children and no way to support herself in an era when women just really didn't have jobs outside of the home, and yet somehow she figured it out, was able to raise the children on her own. I dare you to do better than her parents, who left a famine in Ireland where 1 million people starved to death. And they came aboard an old freighter, an old ship that was used to carrying coal and lumber. And they took their newborn baby, went down into the hold of the ship for months at a time, and the only time they were allowed to go up on the decks is when their child died and they had to bury it at sea. And they came to this country with nothing, just pennies in their pocket, and they worked hard, and they drained a swamp by hand and turned it into farmland, and by the time they died, they owned hundreds and hundreds of acres, and they lived a fairly comfortable middle-class life. That's our family's story. But all the rest of you have similar stories. I'm sure the Lales and the Martins and the Pigeons and all of the families that are out there have similar kind of stories. And although the details may be a little bit different, the theme is the same thing. It's those generations before you that worked hard, that sacrificed, that gave up so you would have what you have today. And to what purpose and to what end? So that you can squander it all on pleasures of the moment? No. It says in Scripture that to whom much is given, much is required. You're heading out into this world. It's going to be different than any other generation before, but you've also been given so much more than any generation before. And so we expect a lot of you. And I want to challenge you, Matt and Gabe and Gavin and Ben and Ivy and Ashley and all those students who are graduating this year. I want you to go out there and to write a biography that future generations would be proud of. And so students, graduates, now soon to be alums, on behalf of the school, its administrators, its teachers, your family, your friends, and your parents, we welcome you to adulthood, and we say congratulations, class of 2020. Thank you very much.